Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast with Ani and Brian. Join us as we explore the art and science of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools to strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional. Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you'll understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence. If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Somatic Coaching Academy podcast, episode 11. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Ani.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm excited to talk to you today about some geeky nerd stuff.
Yeah, we'll nerd out today.
We're going to nerd
Yeah.
out. We're going to feed Brian squirrel. He likes to, we joke that he's like a squirrel that likes to collect nuts, but the nuts that he likes to collect are info nuggets.
Info nuggets.
Yeah.
Info nutgets.
Yeah. So today we're talking about vagus nerve function. And Brian, the vagus nerve, man, is like the popular kid in school right now.
Yeah, right?
It's very popular. Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of curious. What do you think what's up with that?
Well, I think polyvagal theory, I think, has a lot to do with that, right? Stephen Porges' work, just kind of exploding onto the scene a few years ago, has been really important. Also, I think a lot of the work around trauma in the vagus nerve has been pretty explosive too, in terms of information. There's been just a lot of popular books written lately about how important it is to tone the vagus nerve, if you will.
And there's some success kind of achievement, high performance aspects that I think people have kind of latched on with the vagus nerve stuff. Like one of the things that is very popular right now is cold plunging.
Yeah.
A lot of people cold plunging.
A lot of stuff about cold plunging. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about getting you a cold plunge bucket for our house for Christmas, but we've got the lake right next to us, so I didn't think we'd need to do that.
Maybe on an upcoming podcast, actually, we'll see Ani do a cold plunge.
That would be fun. I actually do like to go in the lake when it's cold.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about why that is today. But we're talking about vagus nerve function.
Right.
So there's a number of ways that we can talk about the vagus nerve, I think, through the context of the different somatic stuff that we do, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, so at the Somatic Coaching Academy, of course, we work in the realm of somatic practices, somatic tools, and somatic skills. Like we say, that's what creates a complete somatic coach. Complete somatic coach is you have to be able to have expertise in all three of those areas.
Well, what's the difference?
Well, can we talk about it just in the sense of vagus nerve function as we go through and talk about it?
Sure. So do you want to talk about somatic practices first?
Yeah, let's talk about that and back up for a second to talk about the vagus nerve for a moment, right? So what is the vagus nerve? So the vagus, right, let's talk about that. Right, so the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve, right? There's 12 cranial nerves that exit directly from the brain into the body and other places. And the vagus nerve is the longest of those nerves. It's actually one of the longest nerves outside of the central nervous system that extends in through the body. The vagus nerve actually starts in the brain stem and goes all the way down to the very ends of the sexual organs. So it's, extends quite long. Now, we talk about the vagus nerve, but it's actually two nerves at least. And this is where the whole idea of polyvagal theory comes from, that it's poly means more than one, right? So it's more than one nerve. The vagus nerve acts more like a conduit for at least two nerve pathways, what we call the ventral vagal complex and the dorsal vagal complex. So the ventral vagal complex, ventral means front. So it innervates things in the front of the body, the face, the eyes, the inner ears, middle part of the ear, the throat, the pharynx, the larynx, the heart, the lungs. That's the ventral vagal complex. And the dorsal vagal complex extends down, innervating the lungs and the heart, but then below the diaphragm, innervates the gut, and then all the way down to the ends of the sexual organs.
So is that what makes the vagus nerve so cool, is that it innervates so many different things?
Well, that's one of the things that makes it so cool, is that the vagus nerve actually is a mixed nerve, Ani. So it's got both sensory and motor function capabilities. The way our nervous system works, it works on sensory information comes into the brain, or into the nervous system, because it actually can come into the spinal cord, into the midbrain, or into the cortex. But sensory information comes into the nervous system, and then there's a motor output in response to the sensory input. So we kind of, with our students, we kind of like have this little mantra: sensory in, motor out,
Yeah.
sensory in, motor out, to
Yeah, that's
understand that all of our behavior, which is motor out, all of our behavior is predicated by the sensory in that comes in. That's literally how we're wired. There's no motor response without some type of sensory initiator for it, if you will.
right,
Right?
which is such a cool thing in terms of sensation-based motivation
Yeah.
coaching, because a lot of people want to talk about the behavior or what we're doing outward, the motor out, but not a lot of people are talking about where that comes from.
Yeah. The sensory base that initiates that motor response.
Yeah.
So the vagus nerve is a mixed nerve. And it has, and this is a really fascinating thing, is that it's at 80% sensory fibers compared to 20% motor fibers. So there's a 4-to-1 difference in the amount of sensory information that flows in the vagus nerve versus motor output that comes back from the brain. So what that lets us know is that in some ways, the brain places 4 times more value on the sensory information coming into it
Mm.
than its own motor control outward on the body, which I think is fascinating. So the vagus nerve really does. It's like our listening
I
nerve.
was going to say it makes a lot of sense because we need a lot of information to
Yeah.
determine what to do.
Yeah, it's like how our brain listens. Our
Mhm.
brain play, and I just want to kind of pause for a second here. Can we talk about things like active listening in coaching and leadership and management, how important that is? And we've all been around people, leaders, managers who don't listen, right? They motor, right? They just
Yeah.
act. They're not listening. But that's actually not how we're wired to function in a healthy balance. A healthy balance, the way we're wired, is that we'd be listening 4 times more than we're acting.
And the
And
physiology reflects
right, the
that, which is
physiology
so cool.
reflects that, and that's a big part of the vagus nerve, which is that's one of the reasons I think the vagus nerve is so super cool.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about somatic practices then, Brian. What are somatic practices?
So somatic practices they're pretty commonly known, right? They're things like yoga, tai chi, qigong, breath work, cold plunging. Those are all somatic practices. So somatic practices are things that we do to help us better regulate our breathing. But they can also be practices like that are self-massage practices, are somatic practices are practices we're doing to the body, doing with the body, right? Somatic meaning body oriented, body centered, and practices meaning we're doing a practice to them. And so there's certain somatic practices that help to what we call tone the vagus nerve.
Hmm.
So
But not all of them tone the vagus nerve?
well, not all not all somatic practices would tone the vagus
But
nerve,
there's certain
but
ones
there's
that
certain
okay.
ones that are going to do that, right? And we facilitated that in our core centering programs. So our core centering programs are specifically designed to help people tone the vagus nerve because we're pulling in all these different features of how that would happen. Now, cold plunging tones the vagus nerve. Like I said, meditation tones the vagus nerve, breathwork tones the vagus nerve. Of course, we know from our experience that when you do things in certain order, it makes it easier to tone the vagus nerve,
Right.
right? So then you're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall. You're doing it in a
Right.
very, very scientific way. There's something really interesting, Ani. The vagus nerve also, I just want to know, is our primary, what we call parasympathetic nerve. So when we talk about our autonomic nervous system, we have our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which is kind of like rest and digest, or kind of like shutdown. Sympathetic nervous system is, think about the gas pedal, and the parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake pedal in our metabolism. And for people who actually have their vagus nerve lesioned, like they actually have it cut,
Mm.
the resting heart rate of mammals or humans naturally goes to about 100 to 120 beats per minute. So most people think the resting heart rate's like 70 or 80. Actually, the natural resting heart rate of mammals is very high. Mammals are naturally sympathetic characters.
Hmm.
We're very, very highly wound up. And so humans, like your heart rate would be like 100, 120 beats per minute if you didn't have a vagus nerve.
Hmm.
So the vagus nerve is acting all of the time to kind of slow the system down, kind of thing. So we're under this constant kind of parasympathetic input. So here's the thing: when we have a stress response, it's part of it is that our sympathetic input goes up, but the other part is that your brain pulls the parasympathetic influence away, and we naturally go high because that's where we naturally are. Our resting state is actually high. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
So with somatic practices, what we're doing is we're actually toning the vagus nerve. We're making, and by toning, it means to make stronger. So we're actually making the vagus nerve pathways stronger. And when the vagus nerve pathways get stronger, they have a greater capacity to influence that sympathetic dominance that's occurring in our body as mammals.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes then more of our resting state, right? So the sympathetic, it's almost like we have the car gets put on cruise control rather than gas pedal just going down faster and faster and faster with every little stressor that we're experiencing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think this is why we need to practice. Like you said,
Yeah.
like you go to the gym, we go to the gym, we
Yep.
know that's important. Why you need to practice toning your vagal nerve, because the vagus nerve function can really help us to be the humans we want to be in the world.
Yeah. Exactly. And like I said, you could do that a lot of ways. A lot of people are doing great things around toning their vagus nerve right now. And again, we're really big advocates of doing it in a certain way in order to get the most effective bang for your buck, if you will,
Right.
so that you're really helping to build on foundational elements of somatic competencies, if you will, right? So when you do core centering practices, that's our way of helping people to consistently and effectively tone their vagus nerve, so that over time their vagus nerve helps to be a better regulator of their nervous system.
So it sounds like that's really important. Do that every
Yeah,
day.
do that every day.
Definitely
Sure.
do that every day. And don't stop there. Like now,
Yeah.
what
Well,
about somatic tools?
yeah, so let's keep going, right? Because somatic practices are great. People do those for themselves all the time. That's really, really critically important. So let's go deeper though with somatic tools. So somatic tools really are, in terms of the vagus nerve, what we want to talk about now is heart rate variability.
Hmm.
So for those of us who don't know about heart rate variability, it's the variability of our heart rate, right? Just like what it sounds. Now, for every inhalation, every time we take an in breath, we actually have a sympathetic nervous system response. So we go into like a little bit of fight or flight, if you will. Now, fight or flight's like an excessive sympathetic response. But if I think about it like this, every time we take an in breath, our body hits the gas a little bit,
Mm.
right? Every time we do an exhale, our body hits the brake a little bit. So every inhale is associated with the sympathetic nervous system. Every exhale is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system.
I'm doing it right now. Are you doing it right now?
You're exhaling a little bit to kind of
I'm doing a
calm
little
it.
I'm doing a little inhale, see what that feels like.
Yeah, right.
I'm
You
doing a
can
little
try it.
exhale and see what that feels like.
Yeah, what does it feel like? You can feel like inhale, kind of is a little gas, right? Exhale, a little break. And so you can do that mindfully with somatic practices, by the way. If you want a little bit of a uplift or a little bit of a calm down,
Right.
right? You can use either inhale or the exhale. However, what happens is, so every time we inhale and exhale, since we have a little bit of a sympathetic input and a little parasympathetic input, our heart rate changes. Because with sympathetic input, our heart rate's going to speed up. With parasympathetic, our heart rate's going to slow down.
Our heart's doing a lot of work then.
Heart's doing
Speed
a lot
up,
of
slow
what
down,
else?
speed
Speed up,
up,
slow
slow down.
down, right? And so that's what's called the variability in our heart rate. Now, if your heart rate stayed the same between when you exhale or inhale, or doesn't change much, that's a very low heart rate variability. So, it's funny when I first started hearing about heart rate variability, I thought, oh, don't I want like it's just a steady heart rate of whatever 50 beats per minute, whatever, just right along. Isn't that what I want? And I found out, no, that's not what I want, because low heart rate variability or less adaptability of your heart rate to move between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system has actually been linked to higher mortality rates and more disease.
So it's about adaptability.
It's about adaptability, exactly. We want to be adaptable. Our heart rate the higher our heart rate variability, the more adaptable and resilient our physiology is. That's really kind of what we're going after with this. And that's all a function of the vagus nerve, by the way. So the better kind of toned and adaptable the vagus nerve is, that equates to better heart rate variability. So now we need to, if we want to take this up a notch in terms of, because we know that people with higher levels of heart rate variability tend to be happier, more resilient, more effective, more disease disease resistant, right? They live their lives in just healthier, happier, more resilient ways when you have higher heart rate variability. And so it would make you think that, oh, if I can raise my heart rate variability, does that mean that I'm going to be happier and more resilient? Yes, that is what that means. you'll actually be more positive. You'll tend to think positively more often. This interesting thing on, a lot of people are like trying to think more positive and they're doing coursework on thinking more positive. But how many people are actually doing things from a somatic tools perspective to improve their heart rate variability?
Well, what I'm hearing you say is, I'm trying to think of a metaphor. It's like trying to change the effect rather than change
Right.
the
Yeah,
cause.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if you can just work, and this is the cool thing about somatic tools, about any somatic work, is that when we make an effect in the physiology, it then has an effect in the real world because we're creating our reality from the inside out,
So, what
if
are
you will.
somatic tools?
So our primary somatic tool is cross mapping, right? That's the one that we use. And when we know one of the most powerful ways to help improve heart rate variability is when you're using tools that consciously move attention back and forth between the hemispheres of the brain is one thing, right? You're moving back and forth between left hemisphere, left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and then doing some other specific things as a part of that, as well as toggling back and forth consciously between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, right? We're actually toggling back and forth between those things. We're actually helping to improve our heart's capacity to become variable with that activity.
So you keep saying conscious,
Yeah, we're doing it consciously.
right?
It's a method, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's a process we're following. So we're doing it consciously. We're following a conscious process that moves our awareness back and forth between our brain hemispheres and back and forth between alternate autonomic nervous system functions: sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And but we're doing it consciously. We do it consciously. That's actually been shown to improve heart rate variability.
I'm just giggling a little bit because when we hear about people trying to adopt high performance strategies, I was just listening to a podcast recently where somebody was saying that they started taking Adderall for high performance, and like there are things that people do like
Yeah.
that for high performance.
Right.
I'm listening to you with the consciously back and forth with the hemispheres, like that's just so much easier and better for your health.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about vagus nerve function now with somatic tools.
Yeah. So that's what we just did with somatic tools.
So it's all about heart rate variability.
Yeah, cross mapping is specifically around heart rate variability. That's really what we want to be able to manage. Because the vagus nerve around somatic practices, remember, it's about toning the vagus nerve. Let's just make the vagus nerve stronger.
Okay.
Somatic tools, we're talking about the interaction between the vagus nerve function and heart rate
And
variability.
heart rate variability.
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's up the ante and
Yeah.
talk about somatic coaching skills.
Yeah. So let's go one more level up here: somatic coaching skills. So a lot of the way, again, that we work at the Somatic Coaching Academy is from the bottom up, right? So we're helping people to better manage, balance their autonomic nervous system physiology. And that's a lot of what the somatic practices and somatic tools do. And in general, we have really amazing ways of doing this, but really helping people to regulate their nervous system at that point. Now, once the nervous system is regulated, because when the nervous system is not regulated, it's very difficult to do coaching with people whose nervous system is not regulated.
Can we just pause on that for a
Yeah.
second? Because I think that's really important as a coach to even know
Yeah.
what that means.
Got to know that.
Because here's the thing, if you don't know what that looks like when your client's nervous system is unregulated, you're actually not going to be able to do anything with them, but you don't know it.
Right.
So if you know it, then you can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
But but we could be coaching somebody who's unregulated and just like bumping our head against the wall, and then we wonder what's either wrong with us or what's wrong with them.
Yeah. And we won't realize that someone's dysregulated too, right? And we've talked about that in other podcasts. Talk a lot about that on our webinars and in our library and that kind of stuff, what that actually looks like when someone's dysregulated, right? In terms of just evasiveness of answers, difficult to make eye contact, like all those things.
Well, a lot of our students actually have a conversation with their clients about the window of tolerance,
Right,
so
yep.
that they have that conversation in session 1, and then they can be on the same page about it.
Totally.
Okay, so
all right. So the nervous system has to be regulated in order to really good coaching, and even specifically somatic coaching. So somatic coaching skills, Ani, are really about asking very precise questions, right? Coaching is about asking questions. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, partnering with your client to help them get the information from in them.
Yeah. And so when someone's dysregulated, there's parts of their brain function that's just not online.
They're offline.
Right, just offline. There's parts of the brain that's offline. And when it comes to,
And we don't always know
we don't always know it. When
it.
it comes to vagus nerve function, though, let's talk about the 3 levels of safety outlined by Stephen Porges in polyvagal theory. So what Stephen Porges says is that when a mammal is threatened, when mammal's threatened, the first thing that we do is we basically kind of try to activate social engagement. And you see that in people's faces, right? So the tone of voice changes for somebody, the face will change. I mean, we've all had someone call us up on the phone that we talk to regularly, and within 2 words, we can tell something's wrong because their voice is different. And so that's actually the ventral vagal complex innervates the voice, the throat, the face, the eyes, the ear, right? All that kind of stuff. So that's actually an activator for social help, for social engagement. Now, if social engagement doesn't come, then the next thing we do is go to fight or flight. And if that doesn't, if fight or flight doesn't reduce or help us evade the threat, then we go into the dorsal vagal complex, which shuts the whole system down. All right. So we know from resilience studies, like to create a really, really resilient human, those resilient humans have a higher capacity to maintain social engagement, stay in social engagement, even when things are difficult. And that means that their brain function has to stay online, and that social engagement is associated with the ventral vagal complex. So the vagus nerve function is intimately tied in with the capacity to stay socially engaged. The stronger the ventral vagal complex function, the more capacity someone has to stay socially engaged, which means the more resilient they are. How are we doing so far? Is that making sense?
Yeah, really good. And I think that something we hear in leadership all the time is don't react, or respond.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm thinking about when you're talking about this, because really, truly being able to be like this would be actually able to respond to
Yeah,
somebody.
right. And so this is really interesting, because when we talk to our students about this and people about this, and I give them that order. Okay, so it goes ventral vagal complex, sympathetic nervous system, dorsal vagal complex, 3 levels of safety. And they say, I seem to jump right into fight or flight. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even know, like social engagement, but we're wired that way.
Yeah.
So it might happen like in a
Yeah.
millisecond, and then it goes right to fight or flight. For some people, you skip right to the dorsal vagal shutdown, right? You
And
just
that would
go
be based on how they're conditioned to
how you're conditioned.
behave. Yeah.
So again, the reason this is important is because the stronger the ventral vagal function, the more of a window you have of social engagement before you go into fight or flight.
Hmm.
So people who have a really short, like very minimal social engagement window before they go into fight or flight, they could really use to work on that ventral vagal function, right? Because the stronger that is, the more of a space you create to be able to seek social engagement or have social engagement or actually be socially engaged as a leader. Like to have someone come into your office and tell you that there's a problem going on. And as a leader, do you go right to fight or flight? How
Yeah.
helpful would it be if you actually had a longer run up of being able to socially engage with the person bringing the problem? I think that would make you a better leader.
Yeah, this is one of the things we really work with our students on, helping them to become a person who can
Mhm.
um, be with anything that's brought up in a session. And I think our students really role model
Mhm.
this kind of way of being,
Yeah.
and we can help our clients work towards that way of
Yeah,
being.
totally. And of course, our students and our clients don't get that way by accident.
No,
Right?
they don't.
We use somatic coaching skills. So here at the Somatic Coaching Academy, we use somatic coaching skills like visual led release, pattern deconstruction, reconstruction. What was the other one I was going to mention?
Advanced cross
Advanced
mapping
cross mapping
skills.
skills. There was another one right at the tip of my tongue, and it just flew off my tongue. But so natural law questions, of course,
Oh, yeah.
duh. Like, boy, there you go. The natural law inquiry. So when we ask specific questions, Ani, what we do is we actually begin to turn on certain parts of the brain that are associated directly with social engagement. We start to turn on brain centers associated with, hey, moral imperative, like how we actually are able to assess rather the situation from a moral perspective. Our executive functioning areas, the ability for empathy, for decision making. All those areas of the brain actually begin to activate and come online when we do these somatic coaching skills. So this is just another way to look at vagus nerve function from this direction, right? So we have somatic practices that tone the vagus nerve. We have somatic tools that improve heart rate variability, that increase resilience, that help someone have a better regulated nervous system, that help people become happier, more alive in their lives. And then we go even deeper with somatic coaching skills, which begin to activate specific parts of the brain that enhance and strengthen social engagement. All of that leading back to improved vagus nerve function.
One of the things that's coming to me as you're talking about this is sometimes people will ask us how long the courses
Mhm.
take here at the Somatic Coaching Academy. And, they want something that's more like a weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Mhm.
And this takes time to practice so that we get good at it, just like any skill.
Mhm.
And so I always encourage people to actually engage with programs that are a little lengthier, because then when you graduate, you're going to know that you have mastery. And, we have now time tested when our students graduate, and part of it is because it's a certain length of time,
Mhm.
they have the capacity to do these things because they've really gained the skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, vagus nerve, very cool.
Very cool.
Vagus nerve function, very important. I know you have lots more to say on this topic, and we'll be interested to talk more about the vagus nerve. But for today, that's it. We'll see you later.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself. Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.